Welcome to another video discussion on quantitative research or practical research 2. As for my students, we are now in your module 3 and we will be talking on the nature of variables. Please do not forget to take down some notes, important information that you can gather in this video, and also some questions that you need clarification and ask them during our Google Meet and MGC. I hope that you would learn something from this video, and this will help you when you are going to conduct your study. Alright, let's get started. This time we are now in your module 3 and our topic is on the nature of variables. A variable is any element or entity which can be measured for quantity or quality. In addition, these are properties or characteristics of some event, object, or person that can take on different values or amount. When conducting a quantitative study, you are expected to measure or figure out the relationship between your variables. So as you can see here, it is measurable. It's either quantity or quantitative variables, and we also have quality or qualitative variables. Siguro you might have wondered, bakit merong quality or qualitative variable where in fact we are talking about quantitative research or study, but later on you will understand why. So as you can see, you are going to measure to see the relationship of the variables under study, and how you are going to measure them is, of course, you will use a statistical method, and it is important that you understand what is the kind of variable that you used in your study for you to also choose what best statistical method you are going to use in analyzing your study. You may also manipulate or control these variables depending on the kind of research you are conducting. Usually, when you are going to manipulate your variable, it is under experimental study. But later on, you will know what are the quantitative research designs and when you are going to manipulate the variables under your study. One way of classifying variables is through determining their nature. Ano ba yung nature ng variable mo? Malalaman mo kung paano mo siya i-classify. Based on this classification, the two general types of variables are the quantitative and qualitative variables, as I've mentioned earlier. Quantitative variables, these variables can be measured numerically. Obviously, by the name itself, quantity, pag pinag-uusapan natin yan, nandiyan yung numbers. So, it has a numerical value. Variables used primarily in quantitative research. Although this one is primarily used in the quantitative research, it does not mean that we are not going to use qualitative variable. It can be classified under two types, which is first discrete and second is the continuous variable. Again, quantitative variables are those quantifiable. It has a numerical value. First is the discrete variable. It can be counted na bibilang, can only be denoted by positive whole numbers, and are not described in ranges. Please take note that when we are talking about discrete variables, we have a positive whole numbers. Example is the number of children in a household. Diba, a number of children in a household, we cannot have a negative value for that one, and we cannot also have a decimal or a value that is not whole. For example, you cannot have a 3.5 number of children or siblings, right? Ano yun? Half lang, manananggal yung kapatid mo. So, dapat whole numbers siya. So, that is an example of a discrete variable. Again, it should be positive and whole numbers. Hindi siya pwedeng negative at hindi din siya pwedeng non-whole numbers or fractions or decimals. Continuous variable, on the other hand, is referred to as interval variables. Okay, please do not be confused that when we are talking about continuous variable, it is the same with interval variable. So those terms, continuous and interval, are interchangeably used. These are measured in ranges and can be denoted by non-whole numbers. It can have positive or negative values. Okay? So, kung kanina sa discrete, hindi siya pwedeng merong negative values, dito naman sa continuous, it can be both positive or negative, but it should be non-whole numbers. It can be non-whole numbers. It can also be expressed as fractions. For example, we have temperature. Body temperature is an example of a continuous variable. Bakit kasi we cannot have a body temperature that is negative. Mamamatay, patay ka na niyan kung negative na yung body temperature mo. And pwede siyang non-whole numbers. For example, 36.8, 38.2. Diba? Those are positive numbers and non-whole numbers. Naka-decimal siya. Meron siyang mga points. Okay? Under continuous variables naman, we have the ratio variables. Okay? This is a special type of continuous variable. Bakit siya naging special? This type of variable cannot have a negative value. Okay? So, special siya kasi, di ba sinabi natin kanina that a continuous variable pwede siyang positive or negative. But under continuous variable, we have the ratio variable in which hindi siya pwedeng merong negative value. Ano bang halimbawa ng mga variable na ganon? Example, as you can see here, meron tayong weight and height. So, pag weight yung pinag-uusapan, hindi siya pwedeng negative kasi increasing or decreasing yung weight, pero hindi naman pwedeng negative yung value niya, as well as with our age and our height. Pwede tayong 5'2", yung height natin. Hindi siya whole number, right? Pero, syempre, hindi din siya pwedeng maging negative. As well as with the weight, pwedeng 52, 55, 55 and a half, 56 and 1/4. Meron tayong mga non-whole numbers, but it cannot have a negative value. Okay, so those are under our quantitative variables, the variables that have a numerical value or it can be measured through numbers. The next one is we are now in the qualitative variables. It is also referred to as categorical variables. So when we talk on qualitative variable, it is the same with categorical. Do not be confused of the term. Pag categorical, it is the same with qualitative. Despite lacking numerical value, these variables can still be used in quantitative research. Ito yung sinabi ko kanina. Why do we include qualitative variables when in fact, we are talking about quantitative study? Bakit? It involves assigning values to specific categories or groups. For example, blood type, color, and so on. Under categorical variables naman, we have two types. The first type is the dichotomous and the second one is nominal. Dichotomous variables have only two distinct categories or values. Please remember that na dalawa lang pag dichotomous yung pinag-uusapan natin, yung value niya or yung category niya, meron lang tayong dalawa. Example that we have here is the question which responds to a yes or no question. So, di ba, dalawa lang yung pwedeng possible answer. It could be yes or no. Another example is true or false. So, yun yung mga under dichotomous variables. Next one is, if it is more than two, it is under nominal variables. It have more than two categories or values. Some examples of nominal variables are hair color. Diba, the hair color have more than two. Pwedeng brown, black, orange, red, and so on. Marital status, blood type, mode of transportation, source of income and citizenship, marami tayong choices na pwedeng pagpilian kung yun yung mga variables na gagamitin natin. Unlike the dichotomous na dalawa lang talaga, yes or no, true or false, fact or bluff, and so on. Next is we have the ordinal variables. Ito naman si ordinal variable, it is unique in a way that it exhibit the characteristics of both quantitative and qualitative. Again, pwede siya, yung characteristic niya, makikita natin sa quantitative, pwede din sa qualitative. Paano? Ordinal variables have values that can be ranked or ordered. These values can be numerical like quantitative variables, but it can also be arranged into specific non-numerical classes like a qualitative variables. For instance, frequency is described as rare, seldom, sometimes, almost always, or always. Values of ratings are denoted as A+, A-, A, B+, B-, or B, and so on. So as you can observe here, for example, may sinagutan kayong survey questionnaire. Strongly agree, agree, strongly disagree, and disagree. Diba mga descriptive, descriptive choices. It is under qualitative. However, you can integrate a value that is numerical for that one. For strongly agree, you answer 4. You give a value of 4. For agree, value of 3. For strongly disagree or for disagree, 2, and then strongly disagree is 1. Right? So, doon natin makikita on how, bakit siya naging both quantitative and qualitative. Tapos, yung example na binigay dito is yung rating. Diba sa ibang mga schools, yung mga ginagamit nila, itong mga A+, A-. Tapos, may equivalent siyang numerical value. Pag A+, it's, example lang, 90 to 95, ganon. I hope that the ordinal variables is clear. Pwede siyang qualitative, pwede siyang quantitative. It is qualitative. You can integrate or insert a numerical value for your variable. Variables can also be categorized based on their purpose or role. Ano ba yung papel na ginagampanan ng variable? Pwede mo siyang i-categorize for that one. These purposes and roles are especially evident in an experimental study. Bakit? Since in the experimental study kasi, you can, di ba kanina I've mentioned that you can manipulate your variable. Dependent variable, ito yung dalawang classification of the variables. The dependent variable and the independent variable. Dependent variable is the variable examined for changes. So, merong pagbabagong nangyayari dito sa dependent variable. It is also considered the presumed effect in an experimental research. Kasi, di ba nga, meron siyang changes. So, ito yung nagiging effect ng ginawa mong research mo. So, meron tayong cause and effect dito. An independent variable, on the other hand, is the variable that is considered to affect the dependent variable. Okay, ulitin ko lang. Meron tayong cause and effect. So, dependent variable, siya yung naaapektuhan. Siya yung nagbabago, depende sa ginawa ni independent variable. So independent variable, siya yung nagiging dahilan kung bakit mayroong pagbabago na magaganap kay dependent variable. So, independent variable affect the dependent variable. Dependent variable may change because of the independent variable. Diba, parang sa atin lang din, kung matatawag nating independent yung isang tao pag he or she can stand alone, hindi niya na kailangan yung tulong ng iba. Pag dependent naman yung isang tao, nakadepende siya sa other persons or things or any other factors na kung saan siya dependent or nakadepende. Okay, to further understand that one, let me give you an example. For example, an experimenter or researcher might compare the effectiveness of 4 types of antidepressants. So, meron kang 4 na antidepressants. In this case, the variable is type of antidepressant. Okay, so meron ka ng a variable dito. Yung variable mo dito is the type of anti or antidepressant. Yan yung first variable under study. Now, the question is it an independent or dependent variable? When a variable is manipulated by an experimenter or the researcher, it is called an independent variable, as what I've said kanina. The experiment seeks to determine the effect of the independent variable on relief from depression. In this example, relief from depression is called a dependent variable. Okay, so we have 2 variables in here now. First variable is the type of antidepressant, which is our independent variable. And then our next variable is the relief from depression, which is our dependent variable. So, you are going to manipulate. You can manipulate these types of antidepressant. The 4, diba? You will be using 4 types. You would want to know kasi kung alin sa 4 na iyon ang mas effective or ano kaya yung magiging effect ng 4 na 4 different types of antidepressants to the relief from depression. Halimbawa, merong group of people na naka-experience ng depression. Pero hindi ibig sabihin na kung feeling nyo depressed kayo, totoong depressed kayo kasi it needs, kailangan siya ng mga experts to know na depressed talaga tayo kasi minsan nagsiself, lang tayo anong tawag dito, ina-assume natin na depressed or stressed na tayo where in fact hindi naman talaga. So, example, meron kang group of people, depressed people na really identify that they are depressed. Meron meron kang 4 groups, anong effect, or you can have your study siguro 4 ways or 4 sets of study. Sa first set, yung first antidepressant, sa second set, yung second, third set, third, fourth. Tapos you will study kung ano yung iba't ibang effect ng mga antidepressants na ito or how does it help the person. In general, the independent variable is manipulated by the experimenter and its effects on the dependent variable are measured. Okay, to be more clear, I have here another example on the experimental research. Can blueberries slow down aging? So this is your research question. You would want to know, gusto mong malaman kung yung blueberries ba, totoo ba siyang anti-aging? Kasi diba, itong blueberries, sikat ito sa mga collagen or sa mga gamot na iniinom para to slow down the aging, yung signs of aging. A study indicates that antioxidants found in blueberries may slow down the process of aging. So, in this study, 19-month-old rats, so your subject of the study or your participants of the study here are not human but rats. Yung 19-month-old rats, equivalent daw ito sa 60-year-old humans. So, they are fed either their standard diet or a diet supplemented by either blueberry, strawberry, or spinach powder. After 8 weeks, the rats were given memory and motor skills test. Bakit memory and motor skills test yung ginamit nila? Kasi nga, di ba, yung gusto nating malaman if the blueberries could slow down anti-aging. So, di ba, ano ba yung mga signs of aging? Poor memory, poor motor skills. Or yung mga, what's the motor skill? Yung mga, for example, yung mga rigid activities like jogging, running, yung mga hindi na nagagawa ng mga matatanda. Although all supplemented rats showed improvement. So, sa research, nakita nila na lahat sila, yung mga binigyan ng blueberry, strawberry, and spinach powder, meron silang improvement. However, those supplemented with the blueberry powder showed the most notable improvement. So, based on the conclusion or based on the findings that you have after your study, nakita mo na lahat sila nag-improve. However, yung group ng mga rats na binigyan mo ng blueberry, sila yung mas nag-improve. Which means na effective pala yung blueberries to slow down the aging. Alright? So, the question is, what is the independent variable? So, ano yung what variable you manipulated? It is the dietary supplement. The first group, they did not receive any treatment or any supplement, but the second group, meron silang blueberry. The third group, strawberry, and the fourth group is spinach. Second is, what are the dependent variables? So, ano yung mga variable na merong changes because of our independent variable? Ito yung memory test and motor skills test. So, do you see now the concept of independent and dependent variables? I hope that you understand that one. And if you have question, please ask or take down notes and ask it during our Google Meet or MGC. Okay, so this one, it is the continuation of the independent variable. I will not be discussing that. I've explained that already. This one, it is often best to refrain from using the terms dependent variable and independent variable in non-experimental kinds of quantitative research, such as in descriptive, correlational, and ex post facto studies. Okay, so as you can see, that you are not familiar with these yet because we have not discussed that yet. Later on in the quantitative research designs, you would know what are the other quantitative research designs aside from the experimental study. So nakita ninyo, if you will be using independent and dependent variable, it is usually in the experimental study. Kaya mahalaga na you know what kinds of variables that you have para alam mo kung ano bang klaseng quantitative design yung gagamitin mo, anong types of variables meron ka, and you would also know kung anong pinakaangkop na statistical method yung gagamitin mo to analyze the data that you have gathered. Okay? And then we also have the extraneous variable, which is any variable not categorized as a dependent nor independent variable in a study. So, meron ka experimental study. In your experimental study, merong hindi siya dependent, hindi din siya independent. That is called extraneous variable. Ano ba ito? Ito yung undesired variable that can influence the results of an experiment. So, ito si variable na extraneous, hindi siya kasali sa dependent or independent, pero undesirable. Bakit siya undesirable? Kasi meron siyang effect sa study mo, pero hindi mo siya nabigyan ng pansin. So, by knowing the extraneous variables, you will be able to lessen their adverse effects on your study. Let us go to the second slide. Yung extraneous variable, pwede din siyang, merong other term for that one, ito, confounding variable, which is a variable that a researcher fails to control and threatens the validity of an experiment's procedure. This means that it is possible that the confounding variable has a relationship with the dependent variable and not the independent variable. Okay? To better understand, balikan natin yung sa rats at saka sa blueberries. Okay? Tandaan ninyo na yung si confounding variable, meron pala siyang relationship sa ating dependent. Yung variable na nababago. And hindi sa independent variable. Balikan natin yan ha. Dito, yung dependent variable natin is the memory test and motor skills test, nakaka-apekto yung extraneous variable. Bakit? Example, yung group pala na napunta doon sa mga binigyan mo ng blueberries, kung tao pa sila, mas matalino pala talaga sila compared doon sa mga ibang groups. So, kung mas matalino sila, syempre, meron talagang factor, this a factor could affect the memory test of this group. So, maaring mas mataas yung result nila kasi innate or nasa kanila talaga na matalas yung memory nila compared to the other groups. Hindi dahil sa blueberries, but dahil innate or nasa nasa kanila na talaga yung ganong skill. Alright? Kaya, it could affect the results. That's why you need also to consider the extraneous variables or the confounding variable that is part of your study. Another example, you would want to measure kung ano ba yung magiging effect if you will give or you will let the students watch a video discussion on a certain lesson. So, kung itong group of students na ito, the first group, meron kang section X, sila nanood sila ng video, tapos section Y, hindi sila nanood ng video discussion. Pag after the test, nakita mo na mas mataas yung scores ng mga nanood ng video discussion compared doon sa mga hindi nanood. Pero you did not include the fact that ano yung mga IQ level ng mga students na ito. Baka pala, mas mataas talaga yung IQ level ng mga nanood ng video discussion compared doon sa mga hindi nanood. So, in that case, hindi pala dahil lang doon sa independent variable which is the video discussion kung bakit tumaas yung score nila. But because matalino talaga yung section X na yon compared doon sa section Y. So that is the confounding variable. Alright? Marami pa tayong mga kinds of variables, but in this discussion, pinili ko lang yung pinakamahalaga at yung gagamitin ninyo sa quantitative study ninyo later on. So, I hope that you understand the discussion, you learned something from it, and you can use your knowledge on variables later on in your study. And if you have any questions, if you are my student, you can ask questions during our Google Meet and MGC. Please follow our schedule. And if you are not my student, you can comment down below your question and I will try to answer them if I have the time. Okay, thank you so much for watching and see you on the next video.